Hey, my name is Silas Voss. I'm 34 years old, and I spend most of my time restoring old wooden sailboats that everyone else has already given up on, which people tell me is a strange thing for a man who once walked away from the one relationship in his life he actually should have fought to fix. 3 days ago, I drove back to a 15-year reunion I'd told exactly nobody I was going to, in a gym that still smelled like floor wax and cheap cologne under all the crepe paper, when the doors at the far end swung open and Corinne Ashby walked back into a room I hadn't shared with her in over a decade. She had a little girl by the hand, green dress, gold clutch, the kind of composure that takes real effort to hold when everyone in the room already knows your husband is dead. I could tell from 20 feet away that the effort was costing her something. The room did that thing rooms do when everyone recognizes someone at once, and nobody wants to be the first one to react out loud. Conversations kept moving. Eyes didn't. I caught a fragment of a sentence near the drink table. Somebody's name, the word funeral. Pitched low enough I wasn't meant to hear the rest, and I didn't. Not yet. Corinne wasn't scanning the room the way you do when you're looking for old friends. She was scanning it the way you check exits in a place you've already decided isn't safe. Then her eyes found mine and stopped. That's when the little girl let go of her hand. She couldn't have been more than 7, in a dress that still had the store crease in it, and she crossed that gym floor like she already knew exactly where she was headed. Past a table of unalphabetized name tags, past 2 guys from my old homeroom who went quiet mid-sentence to watch her go. She stopped about 2 feet in front of me, chin tipped all the way back so she could see my whole face, and held out a photograph in both hands, the careful way kids hold things they've been told matter. "Mommy said you'd understand," she said. I took it before I understood I was taking it. 3 people on a dock, sunlight behind them, laughing at something the camera hadn't caught. Me, Corinne, and a man I hadn't seen in 11 years, grinning like nothing could touch him. "Understand what, sweetheart?" My voice came out rougher than I meant it to. She looked at me like I'd failed a test I hadn't known I was taking, then glanced back at her mother, who had crossed the distance now too, already apologizing before she'd fully arrived. "Nora, honey. We talked about this in the car." Nora didn't look sorry. She let herself be steered toward the punch table, but she glanced back once over her shoulder, like she was confirming something she'd already decided was true. Corinne didn't sit. She just stood there, hands still half raised from reaching for her daughter, and said, "I didn't know you'd be here." "I almost wasn't. He talked about you before he died." She said it fast, like ripping off a bandage before the adhesive could think twice. More than I expected him to. More than I think I wanted him to, honestly. I didn't know what to do with my hands, so I looked down at the photograph instead. 3 kids on a dock who thought they had all the time in the world to figure out what they owed each other. "Malcolm asked me to promise him something," I said, "the summer before he proposed to you." Something behind her face shifted, even though her expression didn't. "I know. You know? I found the letter. 6 weeks ago. He kept a box of things he never showed me. I don't think he meant for me to find it. Not yet. Maybe not ever. There was one addressed to you that he never sent." She swallowed. "And one addressed to me, explaining why. I hadn't thought about that promise in years. Not really. Not the way you turn something over and count what it cost you to break it. I'd filed it under things I did at 23 that didn't count anymore because enough time had gone by. Nora had apparently pulled it back out of a shoebox at exactly the wrong moment, or exactly the right one, depending on who you asked. I told him I'd look out for you," I said. "If anything ever happened, set it on a dock, half drunk on cheap beer, thinking it was the kind of promise you make and never actually have to keep. You didn't call. After the funeral? 8 months, Silas." "I know." "That's it? You know?" I set the photograph down on the folding table between us, careful, like it might crack. "I was ashamed. I told your husband I'd be there for you, and then I let the hardest version of that promise scare me off completely. It's a lot easier to explain a broken promise to yourself when nobody's around to ask you about it out loud." She didn't answer right away. Behind her, the reunion kept moving. Somebody's laugh too loud by the drinks, a playlist looping through songs from senior year like they still meant something to anyone in the room. None of it touched the 4 feet of gym floor between us. He didn't want me to be someone who needed looking after, she said finally. That's what his letter to me said. He didn't want a promise hanging over my head like a debt somebody else had to pay off. He wanted. She stopped, pressed her lips together. He wanted you to actually want to, not because you owed him. He said if it ever came to that, and you didn't show up on your own, better I never knew the promise existed at all. But you found it anyway. Nora found it. She's 7. She doesn't understand nuance. She understands that Daddy wrote a letter about a man named Silas, and Mommy cries when she reads it, and somewhere in her head that turned into a mission. A short, unsteady laugh. She's been asking to come to this reunion for a month. I thought it was the balloons. I glanced over at Nora, now negotiating what looked like a formal treaty with a boy twice her size over the last of the punch. She's got his stubborn streak. She's got his whole face when she's arguing. Corinne wrapped her arms around herself, not from the cold. I didn't come here to ambush you with a dead man's letter, Silas. I came because I was tired of being the only person in my life who remembers him in full color, instead of just as somebody's husband who died on a Tuesday. And then Nora saw your name on the alumni list and decided the universe owed her an introduction. I'm glad she did. Are you? It wasn't hostile. It was the most honest question she'd asked me all night. I've spent 4 months on a 32-foot sailboat that stopped needing renovating a while ago, I said. I just haven't wanted to admit it's finished, because once it's finished, I have to decide what I'm doing with the part of my life that isn't fixing things that are already broken. I picked the photograph back up. I think I've been waiting for a reason to stop hiding behind that too. She studied me a long moment, the kind where you can watch someone deciding how much truth is safe to spend. I'm not asking you to keep some promise you made to my dead husband. If you're going to be around, I need it to be because of something that's actually yours, not an inheritance. Then let me start over, I said. Not the promise. Can I take you both to breakfast? No doc, no letters, just you, me, and a 7-year-old cross-examining me about my life choices over pancakes. That got the first real laugh out of her all night. Small, surprised, like she hadn't expected to have one left in her. She'll ask if you're the boy from the photograph. What do I tell her? Tell her the truth, that you were, that you're figuring out who you are now. Nora reappeared at her mother's elbow, punch mustache and all, glancing between us with the particular suspicion of a child who senses a conversation happened without her. Did you understand? She asked me, chin tipped up, dead serious. I crouched down to her level. I think I'm starting to, I told her. Your dad wanted somebody to make sure you and your mom were okay, not because he thought you couldn't manage without him, because he loved you both enough to want somebody around anyway. She considered this with the gravity of a judge reviewing evidence. So you're coming to breakfast. If your mom says it's all right. Nora turned to Corinne with the flat satisfaction of someone closing a case they'd been building for weeks. See? I told you he'd understand. Corinne looked at her daughter, then at me, and something in her shoulders came down for the first time all night. Pancakes, 9 o'clock. Don't be late. Nora doesn't believe in mercy for latecomers. Breakfast happened at a diner with sticky menus and a jukebox nobody had used in years, and it went about as well as a meal supervised by a 7-year-old prosecutor could go. Nora wanted to know if I could swim, whether I was scared of sharks, and whether I'd ever met a real astronaut, in that order, with no interest in follow-ups once she'd gotten a yes or no. Corinne watched the two of us with an expression I couldn't fully read, somewhere between relief and bracing for the other shoe. The other shoe came 9 days later, in the form of a phone call from Malcolm's mother, Ruth. I wasn't there for it, but Corinne told me that evening, sitting on the tailgate of my truck outside the marina, where the sailboat I'd been avoiding finishing, sat half-tarped against the light. Ruth had heard, from who Corinne didn't know, small towns didn't need a source, just a rumor with legs, that Corinne had been seen at breakfast with a man from the reunion. Ruth wanted to know if it was true, how long. Underneath the questions she was actually asking was whether her son was already being replaced in his own daughter's life before the ground had properly settled over him. I told her it was new, Corinne said, that nothing had happened that she needed to worry about. She didn't believe me. Honestly, I'm not sure I believe me either. Do you want me to talk to her? God, no. Not yet. Maybe not ever. She's not wrong to be careful, Silas. She buried her son 8 months ago. If somebody showed up in Nora's life and started acting like a fixture before I was sure, I'd want someone to slow it down too. So we slowed it down. Or tried to. I came around twice a week instead of every day, which was its own kind of misery. Holding back from something I wanted with both hands, because holding back was supposed to be the responsible thing. Nora didn't understand the strategy and said so, loudly, on multiple occasions, usually while trying to install me at her kitchen table for dinners I'd theoretically declined. It was Nora, in the end, who broke the stalemate. By refusing to acknowledge one existed, she invited Ruth and me to the same Sunday dinner without telling either of us the other would be there, a piece of diplomacy she was extremely proud of once it worked, and slightly less proud of in the 90 seconds before it did, when Ruth's car pulled in behind mine and both adults in the kitchen went very still. Ruth stood in the doorway a long moment, taking in the scene, me at the stove badly reheating store-bought sauce, Corinne setting the table, Nora already narrating the whole event like a sports announcer. Something in Ruth's face worked through several decisions at once. "Nora tells me you fix boats," she said to me finally, arms crossed, testing the weight of the sentence before committing to the rest. "I do." Malcolm was terrible with his hands. Couldn't hang a picture frame straight to save his life. A ghost of something that might have been fondness crossed her face. He'd have liked that about you, probably would have made him feel useful by comparison. It wasn't forgiveness, it wasn't close to trust yet, but it was a door left open half an inch, and I'd learned enough by then not to force it wider than it wanted to go. Dinner didn't solve anything outright. Ruth left early, quieter than she'd arrived, and Corinne exhaled like she'd been holding her breath since the driveway. But 2 weeks later, Ruth called and asked if I wanted to come to Nora's school play, and I understood that for what it was. Not an ending to her grief, just room being made, slowly, for something to grow alongside it instead of in competition with it. The photograph stayed on Corinne's refrigerator after that, held up by a lighthouse magnet nobody ever took down. Some nights I'd catch Nora looking at it while she did her homework, and once she asked me, without much weight behind it, whether I thought her dad would have liked me being around so much. "I think he'd have wanted you to be happy," I told her, however that ended up looking. She nodded, like that settled something, the way she settled most things, and went back to her math worksheet. Through the kitchen window I could see Corinne on the back porch, laughing at something on her phone, unguarded in a way I was still getting used to seeing. I'd spent 11 years believing the promise I made on that dock had simply evaporated the day I let silence win instead of the truth. It hadn't. It had just been waiting. In a shoebox, in a letter, in a 7-year-old's stubborn certainty that she'd found exactly who she was looking for, until the day it finally got handed back to me, whole, across a gymnasium floor I never expected to walk into again.